Emanuel Pastreich is an American academic. He is also an author of several books, president of Asia Institute, and a 2028 presidential candidate.
So what is the point of running for president in 2028?
Right. Well, it's a profound question. And I've taken the step of putting together a little website to introduce myself as a candidate, even though obviously I don't have big funding. I'm not on CNN, and I'm in Tokyo, Japan. Almost impossible to do anything substantial in the United States. But I spent a lot of time thinking about this question myself. I watched the breakdown of politics in the United States, in which you have these two parties that are so completely corrupt. I mean, even compared with 5 years ago, they're more corrupt. And the Democrats have become the sort of like the little lapdog that, goes arf, arf every couple of days, but is basically going along with a program for everything. And the Republican Party is organized as an army, right? I mean, everyone has to follow the rules. So what would be the point of someone like me who can't get the money, who can't get on TV, who cannot operate in the American political system as it exists now, going out and saying, I want to be president, having a website, planning for it? There's not a simple answer. I'd say two things if you indulge me.
I will.
So the first is I ran in 2020, and I was in Korea, basically homeless and with no money. And I kept giving speeches. And eventually the Green Party, members of the Green Party asked me to run for president of the Green Party. And there were only two candidates who were actually registered in the Green Party for the nomination for president, Cornel West and myself. So clearly, those years of giving speeches and writing and talking to people about real issues made a difference in actually getting me in the third largest party as one of two candidates. However, the United States then, and even more so now, is so totally corrupt and so run by this extended security, intelligence, finance, IT blob that I couldn't get on the TV even when I was in the Green Party running. Even with broad support within the Green Party, I couldn't get any coverage anywhere, and the Green Party itself was limited in what they could do to help me. But this time, 2028, the United States, another cycle right around the sun, is even more serious. The institutions themselves are decaying. The marble of the Mouse House, the Capitol is it's turned into sort of like a fudge, or sort of like cheese, right? It's sort of like it melts away in your hands. It's easily destroyed because it's so rotten. And that's why Donald Trump has come to power as a sort of political Godzilla, right? I mean, he just swipes his hand and he can knock down whole, departments of the federal government. He can destroy the whole Congress. I don't think Donald Trump himself is that powerful. He's a Godzilla because the institutions, the mentality, the mindset, the culture, and the sort of moral philosophy of America has decayed to such a level that you can knock anything over, National Science Foundation, Harvard, Department of Education, the entire military system, because it's just waiting to. It's like the termites have eaten away. All that's left is the Mouse House facade. So, in that sort of an environment, I think there would be real value for me to say I want to run for president, even though I know that in the current system it's impossible, and to articulate a vision for what the United States could be based on the best of our political traditions, of our philosophical traditions what we got right. And that in that process, even if I myself am not ultimately successful for whatever reason, that maybe someone out there in the United States, maybe a young person, younger than me, now over 60, young person might hear what I say and be inspired to pick up the torch, as it were, pick up the flag in the battle and march forward. And that person may end up being president or some major political force in the United States. And if I can achieve that would be success.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So who are you going to be speaking to? People who, I was myself embarrassed to admit that I really didn't know what politics was. And I started with Bob Dylan, who said, oh, well, politics is just simply things that people do. I don't know if he really said that or not, but I thought I liked that.
Great line.
Yeah, it's things that people do. And the other thing that I didn't understand was the amount of elections. Right here in New York State, for example, before we get to an elected level, I found out that my neighborhood has community boards. And they often try to determine issues to bring to elected officials. But and maybe somebody else would offer another incremental level, but I would offer that the next position above a community board would be a New York City council member. And they can work at City Hall and actually are legislators for New York City's laws. And then above your council members, you could perhaps start with what are called your New York Assembly member, meaning if you live in a particular neighborhood, you have a council member in your district, you have a New York State Assembly member, and they work up in the capital, Albany, and they are also legislators who pass state laws. We also have New York State senators. And then we have in every state 2 U.S. senators. And I haven't even begun to cover races for the governor, races for the mayor, races for judges and things like comptrollers, whatever that is. And then, then we get to our Congress, our 435 congressmen and our 100 senators, and then finally the executive branch with our president. And I'm sure I've missed out a whole bunch of important roles. But then these elections are also straddled. They don't all happen at the same time. So you could find yourself spending a lot of time not getting paid a dime for it, just trying to figure out what's going on with politics. So when you run for president, Emanuel, who are you talking to? Educated people or people you're trying to pull them away from Monday Night Football?
It's an excellent question. You described very well the way the political system is set up, or at least on the surface of things. It's, however, as I know from my experience with Barack Obama in Illinois way back when, and as you know with the new mayor Mamdani, there is another level of politics, right? There are these people who just get dropped, parachuted in with their own backing from, in various sources which are opaque, and they're suddenly set up. And so there's the politics of working from the ground up, what people are concerned about, the way politics should be, participatory and a debate, a discussion about what is concerned for people, then that should move up the food chain, as it were. This is what in the book Diminished Democracy by Theda Skopel at MIT, she discusses this. She says the problem of America is that the participatory aspects of American society, veterans of foreign war, YMCA, local, the Grange before other things, local systems for governance, in which people every weekend in the old days would go out with their friends and have, these meetings and elect officials, that part of American society has died. We're all alone, essentially. And so there's this gap between the civil society for ordinary citizens and then these systems of governance up there. And that because there's that gap, the whole democratic system has been profoundly undermined. So we are cut off. And that we end up with people like Obama or Mamdani who are parachuted in to the sort of fake democracy, as it were. In the case of Mamdani, I mean, as you know, he went for his second visit to Donald Trump, right, to grovel all over him. It was truly disgusting to me. And I was really sort of shocked because I saw in some of the media, also related to New York, people were still writing all this, sort of in the common dreams type media, that he was still great, right? He was like this progressive who was going to bring everything back to the way it was in a previous age, and more democratic, more participatory, more fair, more egalitarian. And then you see these clear sort of red lights, that he was meeting with Trump before he was even sworn into office. And now he's rushing to see Trump just as he's ramping up both for enormous crackdown in the United States through ICE and other forms, but also for world war. I mean, I couldn't imagine if I were, mayor of New York, why the hell would I possibly want to go, have my picture taken with Donald Trump at this moment? And he's basically a pet. So so to come back to your question about, that's the environment we're in. So I obviously want to talk to all Americans. My range will be limited by, the fact that I can't get on X with more than 50 people. I can't get the sort of access that other people do, and I don't have the money pouring in because I'm not towing the line for various interest groups. I'm not an Obama posing as an egalitarian first African-American president while being showered in money from private equity and various Hollywood and IT companies. I'm not trying to play that sort of game. So it immediately cuts off that sort of support, and I can't get out to people. However, I think for your average working person in the United States, working people, I have the ultimate respect. In fact, I think things are so corrupt in the United States that the only people I have real respect for is working people who actually do something concrete. They cook food, they clean, they take care of some assignment that they're given at their job, and they do it well. This I have the ultimate respect for. I have much less respect for intellectuals, professors, government officials, elected officials who are engaged in this enormous charade, this enormous show, puppet show for the world. And so I would hope that I'm articulating myself today or in my speeches in a way that a working person, maybe someone who didn't go to college or didn't finish high school, would understand something of it and would be intrigued. And I would want to do that. At least my ideal would be that I'm not going to speak down to people. I'm not going to assume that the working woman, working man in the United States needs something like what we got with Donald Trump's State of the Union address, sort of a welcome the Thunderdome, the Mirage or the Sands type extravaganza, right? That working ordinary people have the capacity to rise to a higher level. And the reason that they haven't been able to do that to some degree is because all these multinational corporations have been force feeding them all this garbage, right? In the media, in commercials, trying to distort their values. And that the future of America, that the way to rebuild America is by taking ordinary people and saying, you have the capacity within you to rise to a higher level. So I don't want to talk down to people. I don't want to like customize it to be stupid or to be just about sports or simple things or harmless things. I want to speak frankly to America about what's really going on in America, including some very painful aspects of what has been done to our country.
Mm-hmm.
This is a politics which will have a limited impact from the perspective of obviously, if you're a political consultant out there, if you're looking to find someone who you can latch on to, who will make some secret deal to be a progressive for the audience, but behind everyone's back, get through legislation to make you rich and powerful, to give away billions of dollars to these parasitic economic forces in the United States. And obviously, I'm not your man. This is not who I'm about. My point would be to say that we are going to stake out our ground. We're going to hold our ground, and we're going to basically adhere to the scientific method to determine what is true through a rigorous pursuit of truth in a scientific manner, a rational manner. We're going to stick to the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and how it defines what the United States is, what the government is, and what it's not. And we're going to stick to basic ethics, moral philosophy, the ideas of what is good and bad, which is the most critical thing, and which, as you may have noticed, whether it's in the State of the Union address or the response for the bankrupt response from the Democratic Party, which I discussed the other day, is totally absent. There's no discussion in any of these political debates about what it means to be a good person, what is ethical, what the founding fathers intended for the United States, what the positive aspects of our government are and how they can be realized, what it means to be moral, or the scientific method. How do we determine what is accurate? And sadly, in the United States, and I think this is not an accident, we have a trend in Wikipedia or Grokpedia, I guess they have now, or these various AI-enabled devices that people are increasingly made dependent upon, that they determine what is true based upon the number of sources on the internet or the number of postings by people. So truth becomes democratic in a twisted way. But truth and morality, the set of pillars of politics and policy, truth and morality are never scientific. Truth and morality are never democratic. We do not vote on what is morally just, what is righteous, what is correct. We do not vote on what is scientifically accurate. These things are determined by other criteria. I mean, today it's a remarkable group of people around Donald Trump. Kushner is, now and Witkoff. They're basically making policy. Not only foreign policy, but domestic policy. And then Stephen Miller. These guys are deeply cynical. And so I would say the answer to the question is, along the same lines, right? Is that my role is to set a ethical and institutional a higher bar. That's the point. And to say, for example, that this culture you describe, where people want to get ahead, make more money, become the head of a company, this is the Donald Trump model. It's one of the reasons why he had appeal with certain groups. But this is essentially flawed. That are in America's own political tradition and in our Western moral, for that matter, Eastern ethical traditions, the goal for the individual or for the family should be to realize one's full moral and intellectual potential. So if you're a farmer, to be a good farmer and to do it in an ethical and scientific way with concern for society. The idea that one has to somehow make more money and be like like Bill Gates or Bezos or any number of these parasitic billionaires, this has seeped into our culture. It's a poison that it's gone deep into our culture, and it is in some ways the primary reason why Donald Trump is president, is that we have this culture in which what is true? Did Donald Trump win the election or not? Are these policies going to help America or not? Are ordinary people going to benefit from any of these things that the Democrats or the Republicans are pushing? This is not an issue anymore for so many people in politics and in business, because their interest is just to get ahead themselves. And we see this, I see it all over, including among friends and family from my own sort of background of people who went to, this is, by the way, not a secret. So I went to Yale. I grew up in a relatively privileged environment, and I watched since the 1980s how increasingly those people who had the privilege of receiving a good education, they see it as a privilege, right? That they can just live a good life. It's their right to make a lot of money, however ruthless way they do it, and they have no obligation to make America a better society, to participate in creating something better, and that their main interest is becoming upwardly mobile. But
Yeah.
that's not American political culture. That's not what the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, or for that matter, the writings of Thomas Paine and others, that's not what it's about. And it's not the moral tradition. If we go back, all the way to the Bible or to the Greeks, that was not the point either. So can we in the United States reintroduce the idea of a government of the people, by the people, for the people, with foundations in the best of our moral tradition?
Okay. And I know that in the past, can you tell us about some of the books you've written, and also how some of them include a kind of like a pictogram, or in other words, a photo or a drawing that explains complex issues with a drawing. So I guess that's two things. Can you tell us about the books that you've written, and also the use of those types of illustrations to explain concepts?
Right. So from 2020, when I first declared my candidacy as an independent, which is relatively easy to do, I was in Washington, D.C. Of course, I was out of Washington, D.C., basically thrown out, and in Korea within a month. But I continued the campaign in Korea. The only thing, I was basically homeless and penniless, but I could give the speeches, write them. I had a computer and record them and post them. And I got better at giving speeches, obviously, by doing it frequently. I was able to address issues that others couldn't do. And eventually, my speeches formed a book, and eventually two books. The first book was I Shall Fear No Evil, which laid out both a platform for what I would do as president, running as an independent, and also includes, I guess, about 12 of my speeches. The speeches are not very long, on critical issues in facing America today. Then, but also today. And then they continued. Basically my campaign never ended. I didn't really recognize the Biden administration as president. I was, in that way, I was on the same page as Donald Trump. I didn't recognize this as a legitimate government. And I continued the campaign for president, giving more speeches. And that eventually became the book, the bitter tonic known as Truth, in which I explored in even greater detail what the fundamental issues are in the United States in terms of this moral principles in terms of how technology impacts society, the way in which money and a money-focused economy has corrupted our political and educational system. And I think I was able to do it in a manner that other politicians are not capable of, because they're dependent on money, right, from various sources. And so the main point for a politician in the United States today, and this hasn't always been the case for all politicians, but it's true now, is to form a group of wealthy supporters who will fund you and lead the way to even more money. And so that's your audience. It's not the average working American. It's this class of people who can donate. That's your audience. So the genius of the politician, Obama and Mamdani are geniuses in this respect, is to appear to be somehow populist and with the people, when in fact your primary goal is to serve an aristocracy, and to some degree an oligarchy in the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, the second point that you mentioned was about explaining with pictures, the cartoons. And I have produced maybe 50 or 60 of them, trying to show, how Donald Trump works in American society, who influences him, how politics actually functions. And that was really aimed at ordinary Americans to help them understand what's a very complex and confusing political economic system in the United States. And that I enjoyed doing. I had a friend who did the final draft, because my ability to draw is not as sophisticated as some, but it had very strong, it was very effective, put it that way. And so to some degree, you could say my campaign is a form of education for citizens. I was originally a teacher. I was a professor, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and other universities later. And my job was to try and teach ordinary young kids at University of Illinois, some from Chicago, but many, from rural areas in Illinois, ordinary kids, ordinary young people about, I was teaching them about Asia, which is my field, but it was also teaching about the United States. And so I highly value that. In some way, that's what the campaign, whether I end up as president or in some important role in the United States, or whether I'm completely ignored, the point is the campaign itself, the process itself of giving speeches, talks like this about concrete, real issues, in which the point is not to say that I'm a magician, I'm going to solve your problems for me, the sort of Obama, Mamdani, or for that matter, Trump approach, is to say, I'm not a magician, I can't solve things, but I can, based upon my experiences, give some clues, a roadmap forward for how we can rebuild our country. However, the condition I've put in my speeches, in my talks, is that we first have to recognize the severity of the situation that we find ourselves in, to recognize the criminality which is awash over our entire government, to recognize the dishonesty of basically all the media that we're forced to watch, whether it labels itself as progressive or conservative, to recognize how institutions, universities, local government, companies, and other sort of NGO organizations have been profoundly corrupted or become money machines, no longer serving their purpose. And at the moment that we recognize this reality of where America is, then we can actually start to make real changes. And I really do believe it is possible. That's the whole point of continuing this effort. However, if we live in a limited hangout, feel-good environment in which we've decided that these massive sort of cancer of corruption and decay and state crimes and harassment of people, marginalization of most of the country, that we just didn't notice that. We'll just cover it over, with some plaster. That if we take that position, our country is going to be in for a very, very painful period of time. And I think I'm not talking, a couple of years. I'm talking 20, 30 years. That we're on track now, to be blunt. We're on track now to follow the Soviet Union, that the United States in 2026 is like the Soviet Union in 1989, that the institutions are crumbling, the wheels are coming off the wagon, and we have just a complete collapse of the moral integrity and the institutional sophistication which made the United States in the first place.
Emanuel Pastreich, is there anybody within the Congress, I'm sitting in front of the model of it, is there anybody in the Congress who you think gets it right?
Well, I hesitate to endorse it's a good question, and I there are certain names that come to mind. I mean, I guess it was Representative Massey who had made various statements about the Trump administration, especially the relationship with Israel, that had gotten him in such trouble, and that was impressive to me. But I guess I would stress rather than, and I've also been very critical. I mean, people like Bernie Sanders, or for that matter, Mamdani or Barack Obama, who I think have betrayed the people in their the game that they play, the sophisticated game that they play. But I hesitate to praise anyone particularly, because I think we, the people, the citizens of the United States, have to first recognize that basically anyone in the Congress has already signed on the dotted line regarding the rule of Wall Street, the power of multinational banks and private equity, the control of communications by IT companies who are linked to private equity, to intelligence, and to other privatized parts of the military, that these realities are basically, this is the way it works today. The traditions that existed before, we can find them. They're there. There are traces out there that we can find, but basically in the mouse house behind you, really nobody is talking about that. I would say there's not a single member of Congress who's thinking to herself, to himself, how do we realize the potential that was articulated for the United States in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution? Nobody. Because if you actually went back to that ideal, right, the spiritual and intellectual power of the United States, you'd have to recognize that really no one in Congress is entitled to play that role. That the entire Trump administration, in bed with, in cahoots with the Democratic Party, has created a complete dictatorship. And the State of the Union address made it quite clear that the Republicans are one block, no tolerance for any deviation, and the Democrats are able to object on a few minor points. But as we saw at that sad State of the Union address, when Al Waters, the one African-American congressman, I think, he held up a sign saying, I think, black people are not apes. It was a minor criticism, but he was escorted out of the Congress, which I think there's really no reason to do that. He's in the Constitution. His status is equal to the status of the president. his role is different, but there's an absolute equality between the two. And so if the Democratic Party was a real opposition party, if it were, when Al Green was dragged out, escorted out of the Congress, out of the Capitol, for something like holding a sign saying black people are people, right? Blacks are people, right? That the entire Democratic Party should have walked out with him. That nobody should have stayed.
I noticed the camera stopped, at least the camera that I was looking at. I could see somebody yanking the sign from him. But
I saw that too.
They cut to another angle. It was only later on I learned that he had actually been removed as well, and I saw that he wasn't sitting in his position later on.
Right. Well, so that would be my position. That if the Democratic Party had, any real potential as an opposition, they would have all just walked out at that point. But
have you ever seen anything like that happen before, though?
In the United States?
Well, I mean, now that you've mentioned it, we have something to refer to it going forward. But I don't know if I've ever seen an entire party in the Congress walk out at once, although I would have been very impressed had they done that.
You would have been impressed, right? That would have been real politics.
That would have been real politics. That would have been a showstopper. I don't know why they didn't do it.
Well, they could have just refused to attend. And I think the answer to that is...
I think many did. My Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she didn't go. I think there were quite a few who didn't attend.
Right. So, I mean, there was that... Actually, I don't really want to say the Democratic Party should have done a better job, because the Democratic Party itself is so deeply compromised that I'm not interested in reforming the Democratic Party. I'm not a Bernie Sanders type politician. And in fact, in my own political efforts in the United States, dating back to when I was at the University of Illinois and got in so much trouble previously, in terms of people who stepped up to help me, try and save me, as it were, there were more Republicans than Democrats. There were more conservatives who came to try and help me than there were liberals. And that made a deep impression on me, that there was a decency in many of the sort of what we call conservative groups in the United States that was sort of hidden from me growing up my family was much more a Democratic family. But I was shocked when my friends and family and others this sort of upper middle class and environment in around Ivy League schools, or in Boston and San Francisco, New York, places where I had lived, that when it came to 9/11 or COVID or any number of things that state crimes in the United States in that period between 2000 and the present, that they all chickened out. They were gone. No one wanted to talk about anything difficult. They took the Noam Chomsky, Chris Hedges approach, and that was an eye opener, because I found in my own experience all these conservative groups and conservative individuals who were actually interested in truth. They're not afraid to address the profound moral and institutional corruption of the United States. And so I'm not running as a Democrat. I never ran as a Democrat. I was a Democrat in a previous lifetime, but I was also registered as a Republican for a period of time, and I ran under as an independent, and then in the Green Party. And actually, the Green Party had different factions, but there was a whole mainstream faction in the Green Party who hated me. They really hated it. They didn't like anyone in the Green Party who was willing to take on state crimes, who was questioning a lot of these things. They wanted to say that Biden and Obama, they could have done a better job, right? If they'd just been a little bit more on the ball, had just had a little bit more thoughtful, that they could have been great. And to suggest that the Democratic Party itself is a criminal syndicate, this was totally unacceptable to a large chunk of the Green Party. Mm-hmm. However, there were people in the Green Party, and what we still refer to as Green Liberty, who felt that they could build bridges with conservative groups based on scientific truth, right? Getting to the bottom of what's happened to the United States. I think there was enormous potential for building these sorts of bridges between Americans who have a sort of ethical responsibility, interested in finding out the truth of what's happening to our country, and to forget this left, right, conservative, liberal, Starbucks versus what would be Kentucky Fried Chicken type ideological split, and get down to brass tacks, to take on the real issues. So we had a group in the Green Party who wanted to do that, but the Green Party establishment could not tolerate that sort of politics. And I doubt that I can run in the Green Party again, but it's not impossible. However, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Green Party are not mentioned in the Constitution. There's no discussion, no empowerment of political parties in our Constitution or in federal law. And this idea that somehow things are decided by parties is something that was added later, and it's become an increasingly corrupt and dangerous tradition in American politics.
Tell me something. Behind me here, a copy of the U.S. Constitution. So do you think it's possible to be president, and do you see yourself as being able to work with everybody? And after all, I think everybody swears to uphold this book. Right. And what do you think?
Right. Well, I think first, it's not my job or my intention to work with everybody. I obviously am willing to talk to anybody. That no problem with that. And I do realize that there are different worldviews, and we have to compromise, like with the establishment of the Constitution or Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, to bring together people with different perspectives at some level. However, the level of corruption in the United States right now, the level of illegality that's become commonplace, common sense, is so extreme that I would say my position of president would definitely not be to try and corral all these narcissistic criminals into some sort of harmony. It would be, I mean, it's like, being thrown into the lion's den and saying, oh, well, maybe lions can become vegans. I mean, it's not going to happen. So the way the politics would work. Let's imagine a scenario. Somehow I become president of the United States. I think the way it would work is we'd first sort of draw a line in the sand and say we're going to go back to constitutional governance, and we're going to follow the law, and it's going to be based on scientific truth and basic ethics. And we're not going to tolerate all this deep corruption that we've had. And my guess is that at the beginning, everyone walks out. Pastreich is crazy man, totally intolerable. But if I became president, it means that there are certain factions in the United States that support my vision. And so the way that the politics would work is I stand firm on it. The whole Congress walks out. And then they realize this doesn't look that great, right? They're doing something extreme when I'm speaking the truth, which ordinary Americans can understand. And that the process would be that they are forced to rethink what politics means and what they're trying to do. And at the same time, that the billionaires and the multinational banks, IT companies who have created this, who back these politicians, are going to have to start thinking very seriously about their their survival. Because my position is going to be that based on the Constitution and on federal law, that all these things that were done to the American people, from the 9/11 incident, the crackdown, the creation of Homeland Security, just basically destroying people's daily lives, the printing up of money by the Federal Reserve for private banks, the COVID-19 operation, that all these things the American people should be compensated for. These were criminal actions undertaken against the American people. So that means that my position is going to be, as president, that we're going to seize the assets of all these multinational corporations and the billionaires behind them who orchestrated all these crimes against the American people. At this point in the dialogue, you're going to see a transformation. That some of these politicians who are playing this previous game are going to start to think, well, actually, if Pastreich's, plan starts to go forward, these people who I've been kissing the ass of for my whole career, they may be, high and dry. They may be in jail. They may not have any money. And at that point, there'll be a sea change, and we'll start to get back to real politics. And politics is not a bad word. It's I don't see it as a negative. There's the nuts and bolts of serving the people, not the billionaires, not the oligarchs, not multinational corporations, but the people of the United States. And so I think that what I just sketched out for you, which is to take a stand, which is strong, with support for a certain bloc in the United States, and make it clear to those politicians who are dependent on the money machine that the money may disappear, that the money machine may end up in jail, right? That could transform American politics.
I'd like to ask you, it sounds to me like you're talking about a federal collapse, much like Enron collapsed. Right. But I'd like to ask you three things. One, first about our own Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and then about the Epstein files, and then about Iran. So starting with Pam Bondi, did you have a chance in Japan to see some of her questioning by the House Oversight Committee?
I did, and I saw her reference to the stock market. Her classic. So she was in Florida, is that correct? She was like I'm trying to remember how she was originally. I'm sorry, I'm not up on top of things in Washington.
An attorney in Florida. I think she was the Attorney General of Florida. She became Attorney General of
Florida, but she was very unqualified for that and inexperienced. And basically, she rose to her position through personal loyalty to the Trump family. Which is classic, mafia politics. And she doesn't really know what she's talking about, and so she'll use the sort of force of her office and intimidation to try and stay on top of things.
Like a petulant, immature young girl.
Right. Well, I think she represents well the current institutional decay. But we did see before, whether it's in the Biden administration or the previous Trump administration or even the Obama administration, this trend to promote people who are totally unqualified based on their ability, their loyalty to certain groups. And that you could say that about me. If I had been willing, and I was in Washington D.C. for 2 periods of time in my life, if I had been willing to toe the line for certain corporations on certain issues, and people did approach me about this at the time, that I might have been successful. If not as a politician, as a lobbyist or a consultant or whatever, but I couldn't do it. So I think she's immensely unqualified. She should resign immediately. But I hesitate to make that, part of my speech, because so many people around her are at least as unqualified as she is. And the people she's talking to, it's really, we've reached a new low in America. And that is something we just have to recognize first. Once we recognize that we've gotten down to the Pat Bundy level in America, that then we can start to move up. But if we're trying to deceive ourselves to say everything is fine, then it's just going to get worse.
Emanuel Pastreich, did you know that Thomas Massie was discussing what they could do with Pam Bondi? And he said the problem with getting her in contempt of Congress is even if they were successful in getting a vote that she was in contempt of Congress, that gets actually referred to the DOJ. Which, you know, and so he said, but they had another option, which is to bring charges of inherent contempt against her. And if that were successful, at a maximum, it allows for a $10,000 fine per day. And so, you know, he, of course, has to get cooperation from other members of Congress. So who knows? I'd like also to mention about Senator Ron Wyden, and if you have any feelings about him, he's the Democrat from Oregon. And he's introduced the Epstein financial, if we could transition over to the Epstein files now, he introduced the Epstein Financial Records Act. Now, it hasn't been voted on yet, and he's in the Senate, but he did write it as a bill, and he has sent 3 letters to Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent demanding Epstein's financial records, and Bessent has given kind of ridiculous excuses. But it's been quite a long time since Wyden wrote this bill, and he hasn't brought it to the floor for a vote. It'll only cover what are called suspicious activity reports, and there's a whole bunch of other transactions that are probably important. I don't know if you had a chance to see the photograph that the House Oversight Committee used a subpoena to get from the Epstein estate, but among those documents that they got and released were photographs and documents inside a book called Jeff Epstein's 50th Birthday that was put together by Maxwell. She spent apparently months putting the book together. And one of the entries comes from Jeff Epstein's associate named Joel Pashkow, I believe a real estate developer. And it's a photograph of Jeff Epstein with 3 individuals. One is Joel Pashkow, another is an unidentified male, and then there's a woman in the photograph, but there's a black box over her head. The 4 people are outdoors at Mar-a-Lago, and they're holding a giant check, the kind that you see when somebody wins.
Picture. I do remember.
If somebody wins a lottery, sometimes for the press conference, they'll use one of these 4 feet by 2.5 feet checks, you know, like a sweepstakes, publishing house sweepstakes check. And Jeff Epstein went to the trouble of having this check made and signed. It's made out to him, payable to Jeffrey Epstein, for $22,500, and they've signed Donald Trump's name in. Now, it's not Trump's real signature, but they have used a marker and written the name D. Trump. So underneath the photograph is a handwritten note, that says, Jeffrey showing early skills with women and money, sells a fully depreciated woman to Donald Trump for $22,500. I didn't get the girl. No, I handled the deal, but I didn't get the girl or the money. And this is on a single page of the 50th birthday book. And unfortunately, Senator Wyden's bill will not tell us if Donald Trump ever used a wire transfer or wrote a check to Jeffrey Epstein for $22,500 because that amount is too small, and Wyden's bill covers more significant transfers of money. Do you know anything about Senator Wyden? That I've written his.
I have heard the name, and I am familiar with this effort to pursue more rigorously the content of the Epstein files. But I haven't been following that specific. I'd be very interested in reading the bill, and I would give my support for such an effort. And obviously, we can work with anybody in the United States who's willing to take a stand on these issues. I personally feel that the Epstein files have tremendous potential within them. That if we start an avalanche of releasing everything, that it will eventually start to spill over into the other major state crimes, COVID-19. It's already started, but also 9/11, and that the initial process of releasing some materials related to Epstein can result in the release of materials that would cover a far broader swath of the institutional corruption in the United States, and that would empower us to take extraordinary measures to say we have to clean house. We have to essentially rebuild the entire government, and we have to accept and at that point, when the American people have seen in detail just the level of corruption, they're starting to get a taste for it now. But there's even more. There's even more to it.
Right.
That would create the environment in which the next step would become palatable for the American people. And the next step would be to say, throw them all out, right? I mean, that would, in some ways, lock them all up. My position. Which is to say, I realize there are good people in the Congress, in the White House, trying to do their best. But they were all cooperating in vastly unconstitutional and illegal activities for the last 25 years. And there must be consequences for that. Now, I do believe in the equivalent of a, denazification process, that people can be rehabilitated and allowed to come back into government and into politics once they've coughed up the truth of the crimes that they were involved in. But my starting point, as should be clear to you now, is not to say that I have to bend over backwards to service the false gods of Washington in the horrible institutional corruption. That's not my position. My position is that this is what the Constitution, what basic human morality demands. And if people can't meet the most basic levels of that, then we don't need them in our government. And if that means it's me and you and a handful of people who are standing up to be the American government, then the Declaration of Independence empowers us to do so. The people are empowered in a constitutional process to say that the government is no longer serving its purpose. It's not the government anymore. I mean, I guess maybe I would put it that way. That to say, it's not to say that I think we should overthrow the government. I don't think we should overthrow the government. I believe in government. Otherwise, I would not be involved in these activities. However, I think we can take the position that, say, ICE, this privatized organization, or DOJ, right? This privatized organization posing as government is not government. And that, say, when the White House is taken over by the Trump organization, if we sort of sell off the Federal Reserve to various investment banks and billionaires, that it's no longer government. And so that would be my position going in, my strategy and my politics. And it's not a secret. You can find it in my books. But we start out by saying, this is the Constitution. This is basic morality. These are the interests of the American people long term. If nobody in the Congress is going to stand with us, it's not going to bother us at all. We're going to stand on this platform and this position until people turn around and come to us. And that's what my campaign now for 6 years has been about. No compromise on the fundamentals. Plenty of horse trading on little things that people need to do to get by, through the day, but no compromise on the fundamentals. And Donald Trump is a product. I have no interest in Donald Trump rage. I mean, his family was corrupt at this level from the beginning. Nothing changed. The Donald Trump. What changed was America. American culture and civilization has been so deeply corrupted that sadly, the man, woman in the street has been misled to sort of accept that black is, white, white is black, war is peace, peace is war, and we need to sort of again draw a line in the sand and say no. There are objective sort of standards, objective sort of criteria for judging government, politics, and individuals. And they are, once again, the scientific method for the deduction of truth from facts on the one hand, and the basic human morality supporting the institutions as defined by the Constitution. And as defined by the Constitution, obviously has to be reinterpreted for the specifics of our age. But that there is no possible interpretation of the Constitution which permits for this deep corruption we see today.
Okay. Should we wrap it up for today, Emanuel? And
I appreciate it.
Continue the next time. Is there any last word that you'd like to say, or was that it?
Oh, I would just encourage anybody who would like to reach out to me, please contact me, and to stress that this possible campaign and our activities is definitely not about me, right? It's not about me as, miracle worker, magician solving your problems. But I hope that through these discussions like this very profitable one today with Ian, that we can find a way forward, work together, and that somebody amongst you will take up the banner and march on.
All right. Before we go, I see you a lot on TikTok. So I'm going to put your TikTok account there too. And you also have videos in more than one language.
Right. So that's my campaign was a little bit different in that I ended up spending time abroad, and I was interested in international relations from early on. But one of the things I did was to translate a lot of my materials into other languages. And because I speak Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, that's a first for American politician, first for American candidate for president. I have a different perspective. And one of them is that Asia is important in the United States, not just as a threat, but as a partner as well. And that the first thing Americans have to do is to understand Asia. And so you can sort of imagine what the symbolic value would be if you had an American president who could give speeches in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, what that would mean, how that would change America's status in the world, and how strategically the United States would be able to respond to the rise of Asia effectively if it actually had a president who understood Asia well, intimately, and could evaluate what the real threats are, what the potential is, and how the United States can reinvent itself to these new challenges. Not simply to say, oh, the Chinese Communist Party is evil, we have to protect ourselves from it, but to understand how China works. What are the different factions? What are they concerned about? What are they trying to do? And how can the United States understand China, Japan, Korea, other countries effectively to promote our own vision for what Asia could be, what the world can be, and most importantly, what the United States can be, serving a positive and constructive role in the world.
The official Emanuel Pastreich presidential campaign is Pastreich28.Asia. and on TikTok, Emanuel Pastreich 1964.